And one of the frameworks I've heard you reference in a couple of past interviews is the 4 Ps: people, processes, purpose, and performance. I believe this is how you recommend evaluating teams. And I think this is similar to what you did when you joined Doodle, of creating an assessment of what should change when you start a job. So can you kind of give us a full deep dive on how this framework works and how we should be implementing it?
Absolutely. I mean, first, the credit to this framework goes to rather like people like Peter Drucker or like Deming or Michael Porter. It's not new, nor did I invent it. It's just something that I adopted, again, at Contentful, by the way, back then. And since then, fine-tuned, because I figured out that when you start a new job, you do have a once-in-a-time opportunity that you won't have after 3, 4, 6, 9 months, actually. And what it's all about is that I strongly believe that if you look into these 4 dimensions as a leader, you will have an opportunity to also understand what are the biggest areas and the biggest challenges within my team or within the organization that I should prioritize first in my new role. Because what we all want to do is we want to deliver value. And then there's the 30, 60, 90-day onboarding plan. And we're always recommended to like be silent, like don't try to change things and like, right. But I can't. It's like if you're hired as a leader, you also want to prove your value. This framework for me is super simple to prove value without even changing everything in the organization. And as you said, it's about people. People in my world always come first. And people is all about the leadership teams, the team dynamics, about roles, about responsibilities. And I figured out that if teams have no clue about their ways of working, if they can't describe how they collaborate with each other, if they have too many dependencies on other teams, if they can't clearly articulate the other people's responsibilities in their team, then usually this is a very weak pillar. And that is something that you need to fix fast, because if people can't work with each other, how do you want to get them to high performance? It's impossible. Purpose is the next pillar, and we talked about it earlier also. It's like if there is no purpose within the company, no company vision, no company strategy, no product strategy, whatever it is, even if it's not a full-fledged strategy, but if there is nothing that people can share and align on in order to understand how do we move towards something that we as a company want to achieve, then how do you want people to be on a high performance? It's, again, impossible, because then everyone goes in every direction based on their very limited insights, and it's super hard to align everyone towards a common goal. Process is the thing that I said earlier that I'm super passionate about, but also figured out that process has its limitations. And process is everything about, and maybe it's a simple question that I ask, can you describe how you release products from idea to inception, actually, or even from idea to value? And usually in most companies, when I start a new role, I get 50 different stories of how products go from idea to release, or even from idea to value generation. But if 50 people tell me 50 different stories of how we build products, how do you want to make sure that you build products super fast and efficient, right? Like that's kind of a gamble, and it doesn't really make sense. There is a flavor to it. Mature teams need less processes than immature teams. If a team is really suffering in people, in purpose, in performance, then usually also their processes are super weak, and starting there helps unblock teams. If a team has a high maturity, they do have a great purpose, they do have clear roles. Potentially process is something that you can fine-tune a little bit, but it doesn't need much investment. And if all of the 3 factors are in place, if you have clear roles, the right people in the right roles, good collaboration, good team dynamics, a purpose, and like more or less well-established processes, then as a leader, I can expect my teams to high perform. If I don't care about the other 3 pillars, then I can't expect anyone to be on a high performance, because I didn't really create the surroundings for my teams to thrive. And I think that's working quite well in my experience.
Awesome. So tactically, how do you implement this? It sounds like when you mentioned like talking to 50 people, that it's almost like an internal discovery process that you conduct via interviews. You maybe even tell them a little bit about, this is what I'm doing. I'm going to cover these topics. And then you come back with like, what is your preferred way? Like a document or a slideshow? And are you sharing that with just the execs, for instance, because it might have sensitive information about how people are performing, for instance? Or do you go out and share that with the broader team?
Yeah. So you're right. I put on my researcher hat when I started in a new company. And that's awesome because usually since you got hired, people give you some kind of trust in advance already. So they usually open up. And that's a fair advantage in that case. And then you ask whether I'm using a like clear process or like interview questions. I did when I started. I had a very well lined up interview questionnaire and I went to every single person and I went through the questions. But I figured out that this is quite unnatural. Like I want to get to know people and I want to foster good communication. So usually I do have an idea of what is people, purpose, process, and performance all about. And then I just ask people questions based on their specific role and based on the situation we're in. And it's rather a casual conversation than it is a very well-structured questionnaire. The advantage is that people open up and that I hear a lot about their specific challenges and their specific roles. And I do not only speak to product people, I also speak to sales and CX and leadership. And I explain them why I'm doing it. I tell them about the 4 pillars I'm looking into. I explain them that I try to evaluate where the organization is. And then usually I never faced any challenges. People want to talk about these things because they want to improve their organizational setup and they want to improve their ways of working. And then I take notes, I summarize my things, and I do have a 5-star rating system. So I ask in the end of the interview, every person, can you rate on a scale from 1 to 10 compared to your personal ideal state? Where are we with people, purpose, process, and performance? And then people rate. And then I do have an average rating. I do have my own rating based on my observations. And then I share this usually on a Miro board with everyone in the organization because I think that's super special about me. I barely hide anything in front of anyone unless it's really super sensitive and I'm asked to not share it. But usually I share everything I do have in progress so that it is accessible. There's nothing to hide. It's about the organization anyways. And then I present things on a 1 or 2 slide presentation. Like here's the state the organization is in, and it's just like 1 sentence plus the stars. Then it's a slide with the future state that I think we can achieve in the next 12 months. And it doesn't need to be 4 or 5 stars. It can be 3. That's fine as well. And then maybe there's a 3rd slide with the 5 key priorities I would want to tackle in the next 6 to 8 weeks. And then usually I get a lot of buy-in into this.
That's awesome. And you're doing it totally open, which I don't think is how the average executive does it. At least in my experience, having hired a variety of directors and senior directors too in my career, usually there's kind of a version that just I get, which is like, XY person is low performing, needs to be managed out, etc. But you're doing it totally open. Can you tell us more about that?
It's not about people. I'm not evaluating individuals and I can't, right? Like people self-rate how they work with each other. And I think that's pretty much like an employee NPS survey that in good startups is usually anyways part of their culture. And I think I'm not sure if that would work in an enterprise, for example, but I'm rather referring to my experience in small to medium-sized businesses. And there, I think it is quite common to also be more or less frank about what's going on, what's going wrong, what's going well. And since I'm not the one who evaluates it or like finger points at someone, but rather says like, look, that's what I heard. That's what I observed. That's not my opinion, but it's my observation. And here's what I would do. No one feels attacked about this because I try to stay as neutral as possible. And I can because I'm the newbie in the room. So how can I have an opinion if I didn't really work with anyone in the room?